Marisol had worked tirelessly for 3 days to make sure everything was perfect. She coordinated the waiters, supervised the floral decorations, and organised every last detail of the menu. When the party finally began, she stayed close to the kitchen, alert to any unforeseen problem, as she always did. That was when Mrs. Adelina called her with a sharp gesture of her hand. "Marisol, come here," she said, in a tone that already promised trouble. The waiters made a mistake with the champagne glasses. They placed the French crystal ones on the wrong table. "Fix it, now." Marisol nodded and began correcting the mistake discreetly, moving among the guests without drawing attention. But a sudden movement from one of the waiters caused her to accidentally bump into an older man, spilling a little red wine onto the sleeve of his expensive jacket. "For God's sake!" the man exclaimed, shaking his arm dramatically, as if the stain were a serious wound. Mrs. Adelina rushed over, apologising profusely to the guest, then turned toward Marisol with an expression Marisol would never forget. "Is it that you don't know how to do anything right?" she said, raising her voice enough for several nearby guests to turn and look. "You've been in this house for 8 years, and you still act as if it were your first day. This is why people like you never get anywhere in life." A few uncomfortable laughs were heard among the guests. Marisol felt heat rising to her face, but she maintained her composure, as she had learned to do over years of domestic work. "I'm very sorry, ma'am. I'll clean it immediately," she replied, her voice low but firm. "No, what you're going to do is take off that uniform and wait in the kitchen until I decide whether you still have a job after tonight," Adelina snapped, without lowering her tone. "And be grateful I'm not firing you right here in front of everyone, as you deserve." The comment hung in the air like a silent blow. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others, worse still, smiled discreetly, enjoying the little spectacle. Marisol lowered her head, apologised again, and walked toward the kitchen, with her dignity intact, though her heart was pounding with a mixture of humiliation and contained fury. She did not know that very night, everything in that house was about to change forever. In the kitchen, as she took off her stained apron, she heard 2 young waiters whispering near the back door. "Poor Marisol," one of them said. "She's been putting up with that woman for years. I don't know how she hasn't quit." "They say she needs the job," the other replied. "At her age, with no formal education, where else could she go?" Marisol heard every word without saying anything, without correcting them, without defending herself. She let them think whatever they wanted. After all, no one in that house knew the full truth about her past nor the exact reason why, 8 years earlier, she had decided to take that job. Minutes later, while she was organising some plates in the kitchen, little Valentina, now a 25-year-old woman, but still with the same curious eyes she had as a child, entered looking for her. "Marisol, are you okay?" she asked, genuinely concerned, closing the door behind her for a little privacy. "I heard what happened. My mother shouldn't have spoken to you like that." "I'm fine, my girl," Marisol replied, using the affectionate nickname she had kept since Valentina was little. "Don't worry about me. Go enjoy your party." "But it isn't fair," Valentina insisted, with a sincerity that strongly contrasted with the attitude of the rest of her family. "You practically raised me more than my own mother did. You deserve more respect than what you receive in this house." Marisol smiled, genuinely moved by those words, although she did not let it show too much. Valentina was the only person in that family, besides perhaps Don Ricardo's late father, who had always treated her with authentic warmth, without the automatic condescension that seemed to come included in every interaction with the rest of the Echeverria clan. "Go on, return to the party," Marisol finally said, gently guiding her toward the door. "It's your night. Don't waste it worrying about me." Valentina obeyed, but not before giving her a brief yet sincere hug, something she would never do in front of her mother, who would probably consider such a gesture inappropriate between a young lady and the help. What no one in that mansion knew, not even Don Ricardo, who signed her paycheck every 2 weeks without paying her much attention, was who Marisol had truly been before becoming a housekeeper. The daughter of an accountant and a mathematics teacher, Marisol had grown up in a working middle-class family that deeply valued education. At 22, she graduated as a certified public accountant with the highest grades in her class, and shortly afterward began working at an investment bank, where she quickly stood out for her analytical ability and her sharp eye for detecting financial irregularities that others overlooked. During a routine audit, Marisol discovered a financial fraud scheme inside the institution, orchestrated by high-ranking executives who were diverting clients' funds into offshore accounts. She decided to report it to the proper authorities, despite the threats and pressure she received to remain silent. The resulting scandal destroyed the careers of several corrupt executives, but it also marked her as a problematic person within a small and deeply interconnected financial sector, where everyone knew and protected one another. No bank wanted to hire her after that. Doors closed one after another, not because she had done something wrong, but precisely because she had done what was right in a world where that sometimes is punished more than rewarded. Her husband, unable to withstand the financial and social pressure that followed the scandal, left her just 8 months later, leaving her alone with a mortgage she could not pay and a professional reputation unfairly stained. Marisol went through nearly 2 years of deep uncertainty, living off temporary jobs, selling much of her belongings, and even considering, in her lowest moments, that perhaps she had made a mistake by doing the right thing instead of simply looking the other way, as so many others had done. It was then, in the middle of that professional and personal crisis, that her maternal uncle, a discreet man who had worked in real estate for decades, offered her an unusual proposal to manage, under a different name and in complete confidentiality, a small family investment fund he had quietly built over 30 years, without almost anyone in the city knowing of its existence or its true size. "I am not offering you charity," her uncle had told her, sitting across from her in the small kitchen of the apartment Marisol could barely afford. "I am offering you work because I know you are the most capable person I know for this, and because I trust you more than any other financial advisor in this city." Marisol accepted, not only out of financial necessity, but because she understood that the arrangement would allow her to continue using her financial skills without having to expose herself again to a sector that had unfairly cast her aside. She took the domestic job at the Echeverria mansion as the perfect cover, a stable, predictable income, completely removed from suspicion, while she secretly managed from a small laptop in her room at night, a portfolio that grew year after year under the corporate name of Inversiones Algarrobo, a fund no one would ever associate with a housekeeper. During those 8 years, Marisol developed a meticulously organised double life. By day, she ironed shirts, supervised the cleaning staff, and endured condescending comments with a patience that seemed inexhaustible. By night, after the entire mansion was asleep, she reviewed quarterly reports, analysed investment opportunities, and made financial decisions that moved millions of dollars, all from the same small room at the back of the property that the Echeverria family considered appropriate for someone of her position. What the Echeverria family also did not know was something even more significant. Just 6 weeks earlier, Inversiones Algarrobo had completed, through a discreet operation using legal intermediaries, the acquisition of the entire mortgage debt on the Echeverria mansion, a property Don Ricardo had mortgaged 2 years earlier to finance a failed hotel expansion that almost no one in his social circle knew about. Don Ricardo, proud as he was, had never publicly revealed his financial difficulties. But the reality was that, without knowing it, the family that humiliated their housekeeper every week depended, at that very moment, on the goodwill of an investment fund that, without anyone imagining it, was managed by the very same woman who cleaned their floors. That same night, after the incident with the spilled wine, Marisol remained in her small room at the back of the property, reviewing, as she did every night, the financial reports of Inversiones Algarrobo on her laptop. That was when she received an urgent notification from her financial lawyer. The Echeverria family did not make the corresponding payment this month on the mortgage debt. This is the second consecutive missed payment. According to the terms of the contract, we have the option to begin foreclosure proceedings or renegotiate the conditions. We need your decision this week. Marisol read the message twice, feeling a strange mixture of overlapping surprises. Not only did she manage, without fully knowing it until that moment, the debt of the house where she worked, but she also had in her hands the power to decide the financial fate of the family that very night had humiliated her in front of 80 guests. During the following days, while she carried out her usual duties in the mansion, serving breakfast, supervising the cleaning staff, listening to Mrs. Adelina's contemptuous comments about people who do not know their place, Marisol internally processed the decision before her, without anyone in that house suspecting absolutely anything. Finally, she decided to act. Through her lawyer, she requested a formal meeting with Don Ricardo Echeverria to discuss matters related to the mortgage debt on his property, using her full legal name, Marisol Andrade Quintero, without any mention of her current domestic work. Don Ricardo, worried about the seriousness of his financial situation, accepted the meeting without imagining, not even for a second, who was truly behind that name. The meeting took place in the legal offices that Inversiones Algarrobo used for formal matters, a discreet but immaculate space in the city's financial district. Don Ricardo arrived accompanied by his personal lawyer, visibly tense, expecting to meet some traditional banking executive, willing to negotiate more favourable terms. When the door opened and Marisol entered, dressed in a formal dark grey suit, her hair pulled back in a different style from the one she wore at the mansion, without the uniform that defined her in her daily life, Don Ricardo took several seconds to recognise her. When he finally did, his expression shifted from confusion to astonishment, and from astonishment to something resembling contained panic. "Marisol?" he asked, his voice breaking. What is going on here? Going on? "Good afternoon, Don Ricardo," she replied, sitting calmly at the other end of the table and opening a folder with legal documents. "My full name is Marisol Andrade Quintero. I am the principal administrator of Inversiones Algarrobo, the fund that currently owns the entirety of the mortgage debt on your property." Don Ricardo's lawyer, confused, quickly reviewed the documents, verifying signatures and legal letterheads with growing urgency. His face, like Don Ricardo's, gradually turned pale. "This cannot be right," Don Ricardo murmured, searching for some mistake in the situation, some explanation that would allow him to return to the reality he knew. "You work in my house. You've spent 8 years cleaning my floors." "I have worked in your house, yes," Marisol confirmed, without altering the tone of her voice. "And I have also managed, during those same 8 years, an investment fund my uncle built over 30 years of quiet work. Both things can be true at the same time, Don Ricardo. People like me, the ones your wife describes as people who never get anywhere in life, sometimes simply choose not to display what they have." Don Ricardo's lawyer intervened, still reviewing the documents in disbelief. "Don Ricardo, the documents are legitimate. The acquisition signature, the notarial records, everything is in perfect legal order. There is no administrative error here." Don Ricardo sank slightly into his chair, processing the magnitude of what he was hearing. He remembered with growing shame every contemptuous comment his wife had thrown at Marisol over the years, every time he had been present during those scenes and had chosen silence instead of defence. He also remembered the times he himself, without Adelina's direct cruelty, but with an equally harmful indifference, had treated Marisol like just another piece of furniture in the house, someone whose existence he barely registered while she organised every aspect of his domestic life. "Why did you never say anything?" he finally asked, with a mixture of confusion and something resembling reluctant respect. "You could have left this job years ago. You could have lived completely differently." "Because this job gave me something money alone could not give me," Marisol replied. "Stability, routine, and strangely enough, a certain peace of mind, far from a financial world that had treated me unfairly. And because honestly, Don Ricardo, I never thought I would need to reveal who I really am, until your wife decided my dignity was something disposable in front of her guests. According to the records, you have 2 consecutive missed payments," Marisol continued, returning to her professional tone. "Under the terms of the original contract, I have the legal authority to initiate foreclosure proceedings immediately, which would result in the total loss of the property within 90 days. "Marisol, please," Don Ricardo said, abandoning completely any trace of his usual arrogance, leaning forward with genuine urgency. "That house has belonged to my family for 3 generations. My father built it with his own hands, literally, before we had the money to hire luxury architects. I beg you, let us find another solution. Not for me, for my daughter, who loves that house more than anything else in the world." Marisol remained silent for several seconds, observing that man who, for the first time in 8 years, spoke to her without condescension, without the automatic superiority that had always accompanied every interaction between them. The clock on the wall marked 4 in the afternoon. Outside, the city traffic continued at its normal pace, completely unaware of the silent drama unfolding inside that small office. "I am going to propose an alternative," Marisol finally said. "Not for you, Don Ricardo, but because I know your domestic staff the gardeners, the waiters who depend on the events in that house for their income. A foreclosure would leave all of them without work immediately, and they bear no responsibility for your financial decisions. Don Ricardo nodded, relieved but still incredulous. The proposal is the following, Marisol continued. We will restructure the debt with a payment plan extended over 5 years, with a reduced interest rate. In exchange, I demand 3 non-negotiable conditions. First, you will formally acknowledge to me the irregularities in the treatment of the domestic staff in your house, starting with myself, and you will commit to a real change in that dynamic. Second, you will present direct apologies to Mrs. Adelina regarding what happened at your daughter's engagement party, demanding that she do the same with me, in person. And third, I will resign, effective today, from my position as housekeeper in your house. Not because you are firing me, but because I no longer need that cover, and because no person should tolerate what I have tolerated for 8 years. Don Ricardo lowered his gaze, something he had never done in front of his domestic staff in his entire life. I accept all the conditions, he said in a small voice, almost broken. And Marisol, I'm sorry, sincerely. I should have said something all those times my wife treated you that way. My silence was as guilty as her words. 3 weeks later, in a much smaller meeting, without the grandeur of the mansion, without high society guests, Mrs. Adelina appeared at the offices of Inversiones Algarrobo, visibly uncomfortable, to fulfill the condition agreed upon by her husband. What I said at the party, she began, with evident difficulty, unable to hold Marisol's gaze for long. It was cruel and unjustified. For years, I have treated the people who work in my house as if they were invisible, as if their work did not deserve the same respect as any other profession. That was wrong, regardless of who you turned out to be afterward. Thank you for acknowledging it, Marisol replied simply. That is the only thing I truly needed to hear from you. Valentina, the daughter who had gotten engaged that night, approached Marisol afterward in the hallway, tears held back in her eyes. I grew up seeing you in my house every day, she said, and not once did I stop to think about who you really were outside that uniform. I am so sorry, Marisol. You have nothing to apologize for, Valentina, Marisol replied with genuine warmth. You always treated me with respect, even when you were a child. That, to me, was worth much more than you can imagine. 1 year later, Marisol was openly running Inversiones Algarrobo, without the need for covers or alternate names, having recovered, along with her growing wealth, something even more valuable: the right to be seen exactly as she had always been, without apologies or further explanations. Marisol never needed anyone to know who she was in order to feel valuable. But sometimes the world needs to see proof in order to learn the lesson it should have learned through simple decency. The end.